Welcome back, MTG Joe here, just in time for the weekend. The bans are in. Meathook Massacre is no longer running around in Standard. It is time for hot takes and best decks. We have a solid 1 day worth of data, but still 39,000 matches of Standard best of one. So we'll go through a special extra weekly meta breakdown to show you the best decks in Standard best of one. If you want to jam some games leading into the weekend, try out some new strategies, potentially make it to Mythic. We get the data as always from MTGA, what you see on the screen, companion tool that runs alongside your arena client, tracks win rates, loss rates, whole bunch of useful features. A bunch of it is free to use, link is in the video description. I'll paste the links to all these deck lists. If you do want to import them in, you can do so as such. So like I said, October 13th to the 14th, we've got about a day's worth of data, 39,000 matches, platinum to mythic rank, and a lot of creature decks have suddenly come out to play now that the big bad menace of Meathook is gone. Top performing deck, 100 matches of Gruul, 67% win rate. Gruul Smash is definitely a thing. It's coming, it's smashing, it's looking to do its thing. So what you're trying to do with this deck is play a bunch of creatures, ideally with haste, and then hit in hard. You have Pack Leader that gets bigger when you cast bigger drops. Your top ends like Halana and Alana and Raiju both put counters, both have like haste elements to it. Stormseeker makes all your other creatures have haste and can also be trample on the flip side. Squeeze, recursive threat. Yavimaya is a 2-drop with trample as a 3/2, or could be a hasty 3-drop with a little buff for the turn. Radha's Firebrand gets rid of blockers. Beastcaller gets bigger over time, and then you have 5 pieces of burn that also could be used towards face in various ways to hit your opponent that way there. From Gruul, we go to Mono White, and there's a few versions of Mono White, but this one had the highest win rate at 66%, and it's just really clean. It was like search white creature, hit 4 of, submit. So Initiate gets bigger over time. Hot Shots at 2/1 for 1 mana, lets you crew the Initiate as well. Nubenalia suddenly gets much better. You can discard stuff, and it doesn't get just hit by Meathook anymore, so the Indestructible suddenly becomes a lot more relevant in terms of text. The stuff you're throwing into the graveyard, you can cast it again with Sarah Paragon, so you get some value with that there, kind of recursive elements. The only removal in the deck is Brutal Cathar, but you can ideally buy it back with the Paragon. You have tax elements with Thalia, as well as the Peacekeeper, and then kind of big power outputs. The Intrepid Adversary can bump up your power of your team, buff them up, and then Adeline is an army in a can that kind of runs over your opponent. Mana base very simple, some Ganjo, and then Plains. Moving on, then we go to Mono Red Aggro. The monocolor aggro decks are coming back to shine. 62% win rate. So a lot of similar elements to Gruul. This one's a little bit lower on the curve, and it's looking to go fast and hasty. So you still have your Raijus, you still have your Radha's Firebrand to get around blockers. This version here, you still have your Kumanos, but you got the little chick that could, the Phoenix chick. You got Play with Fires as well as the Lightning Strikes. Then Hammer Hand as a way to kind of get around blockers for the turn and give haste to some of your other threats. This plays pretty nice with the Radha because then you get it to 4 power. Shivan Devastator on the top end. Chandra Dress to kill as a kind of a card advantage engine, and then Bloodthirsty to flash back any of your burn spells. We then go to a bit of a spicy one. We got Orzov Clerics, the Oops Surprise Toxrill. And this deck is built, it's a Cleric tribal deck that has life gain synergy to it, and has some elements of the mono white deck, but Shadowrite Priest, while a lord for your clerics, it allows you to pay 5 mana and sack a cleric to put a black creature from your library into play, and then you just, this is at sorcery, or sorry, it can be done at instant speed, so you just surprise cheat into play Toxrill. In theory, this can be done with any black creature, so if you have a pet card, something like that on the top end, but I would go to 7+ mana and find the biggest, scariest threat in black that you can play. The rest of the deck's got, like I said, the life gain synergies. You have Lunarch Veteran, Traveling Minister, Elestil Core, kind of the Blood Artisty style effect. The Voice of the Blessed gets bigger. Anointed Peacekeeper is a cleric, which is interesting. You got the Inspiring Overseeker. Jaren is kind of more cleric synergy. I don't know what this does. Markov Purifier, 3 mana, 2/3 lifelink. Been in your end step. Gain life this turn, pay 2. So kind of card advantage engine. Some good cards on the top end. I'd actually kind of surprised there's not more copies of Phyrexian Missionary. It's a good body on its own, 2 mana, 2/3 lifelink. If we look into a lot of the creatures decks, they're a lot smaller, so gaining life can also rebuy your effects, which seems good. I'd probably honestly just cut these Traveling Ministers and play more of that. But not having played the deck, it's kind of hard to say how much this really plays in effect. This is kind of recursive life gain, but this can be used for attacking. This also makes it better when you have the Lord effect. We then go to Mono Blue Tempo. So every format's got your annoying flash deck. This is the one. So this deck is either going to bowl you over, 61% win rate, or just look like it's doing nothing. This is the search counter spell. Add all of them to the deck and say go. But it's really built around Haughty Djinn. Power is equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your yard, and then it gives a cost reduction on your spells. And then Tolarian Terror. This is a card that gets cost reduced. This version is actually pretty interesting because you usually see Delvers or even at times Ledger Shredder in the list. This version is very reliant on these 7 creatures, and then everything else is reactive. With the banning of Meathook, I think it's actually worse for this deck overall because this deck is looking to prey on those slower mid-range decks, and all these hyper-aggressive decks can get to the board pretty easy and get under counter spells. Like this list here only has 3 Fading Hopes, and it doesn't even have Slip Out the Back. So once a creature's on the board, the creature's staying on the board. It's not much they can do about it. So I think stocks in Mono Blue are probably going down, or at least this configuration. I think you need to play more bounce effects, maybe something like Spectral Adversary, just ways to kind of interact with the board more that we're going to see slightly more aggressive strategies. We then go to Mono Black Aggro. I think Liliana's kind of phased out, to be honest, with all the creature go-wide decks. It's just not as effective as a spell. I was trying to run some Mono Black, but this version here is Lower to the Ground Aggro. We have Blade of Oni added in. Just a 3/1 equipment creature that can then give your equipped creature some added stats. You got like Adversary as a mana sink, still Underdog, Sleeper, Conscript, 8 pieces of removal, Trespasser for life gain and Graveyard Hate, Sheoldred on the top end as well. So moving away from like the Invoke Despair package. Probably would play like some Sorens, to be honest. Trim down on these lilies. Then we go to Celestia Enchantments, 59%. This is pretty much untouched. This deck was really good into Mono Black for the most part. Made it harder for some to meat hook some of your bigger things. This version is using Weaver Harmony to double up effects. You'll usually see some versions play Hallowed Haunting. I like that version better. Hallowed Haunting makes everything a cast trigger, just gives you a wider board, plays around any sort of like removal better, scalable effect. But you're really just using effects like Generous Visitor, the Kami of Transience to buff up your squad, and then like Mashiko can give extra power boost to things. You got Exile removal and Borrowed Time and Circle Confinement, and Catilda's a big life-linking flyer that can smash into your opponent. We go to 5-color Joda. This is a human tribal list built around Joda the Unifier. So you're picking every color, you're playing them all, and what you want to do is whenever you cast a legendary, you can cascade it down and get some more effects. You're using stuff like Catilda to help you ramp and color fix. You got a whole bunch of humans that also work in here with like Halana and Alana. So kind of the elements of the mono white deck with some added cards in like Sigarda, while not a human, buffs your humans, card advantage. Shauna can be card advantage. You got some removal and March of the Otherworldly Light mixed into there. And then you get to take advantage of both like Plaza of Heroes and Secluded Courtyard, both as rainbow untapped lands for your deck. And you get the unique opportunity to play the worst land I've seen in quite a while, Thram Portal. I'd probably just play Triomes. This card's fairly bad. I would just throw in some like Bant Triomes, to be honest, and just call it a day. Not really a budget-friendly deck. Speaking of budget-friendly decks, let's go to 5-color Domain. So this is a deck, as you can see, I don't have cards for, so haven't played. I was going to actually play this in best of 3, and then I saw how many cards I needed and just went to the next deck. But this is using the Domain strategy, so you take advantage of things like Llanowar Green Widow that can keep coming back from your graveyard at a reduced cost thanks to Domain. You have Shadow Prophecy, which lets you kind of dig further into your deck, upwards of 5 cards and take 2, kind of mini dig through time. You have Drag to the bottom as a scalable sweeper in this deck, probably the best sweeper now for 4 mana. Depopulate kind of gives them card advantage. This doesn't. It also -1, like minus, so that gets around indestructible and things like that. Unleashed Inferno and Terra Sunder as kind of flexible removal spells, hits artifacts, enchantments, creatures, everything. This exiles as well. Your top end is, you're really playing into the Kami War. This is your main win condition. You can copy it with Fable the Mirror Breaker. It's removal and a threat all in one. You also have Herd Migrations that could just make a bunch of tokens, and then Leyline Binding as catch-all removal as low as 1 mana. So that's pretty much it for the best of 1. I've been playing best of 3 only because the MIQ, the Mythic Invitational qualifiers this weekend. I'm playing a Boros mid-range list. I was trying Mono Black, wasn't really a fan of it in best of 3. Despite that was my plan before the bans. But it's kind of a value Paragon list. So you're using Sarah Paragon to rebuy things like Spirited Companion, Riveteer's Requisitioner. You get to play both Wedding Announcement and Fable the Mirror Breaker, which is really where I want to be in the meta. AO's on the top end, Sanctuary Warden, and then post-board you can kind of turn into a control deck. You got Depopulates, which these creature decks never play around. This card's so good. I might even just be starting to play it main board, but this comes in like if they're bringing in a lot of graveyard hate or small creature decks, the lifelink body is super relevant. And then like Jaya, I've yet to cast it, but it seems good in like the grindier matchups. I have a full video on this. If you want to check it out, I can link that. I also covered some best of 3 decks that could be interesting. That's in the meta breakdown playlist if you want to check that out. We'll be back next week with the full suite of meta breakdowns for each of the formats, and we'll kind of get back on the regular schedule. The ban kind of threw things off for the week, so made it a little bit slower. In any case, if you do enjoy this content, greatly appreciate it if you can. Drop a like, comment, and subscribe on the video. We do these every week for every format, provided there's data, as well as gem a whole bunch of different gameplay within Mythic. And like I said, we're playing Mythic Invitational Qualifier. Made it to the first... we got through the initial qualifier. We're playing in the qualifier weekend itself. Very confusing naming system, but we're playing in that. So hopefully can get through the Invitational, get invited to the Arena Championship, win some money, and kind of go from there. In any case, have a great one. Let me know what cool decks you're playing in Standard, and hopefully what your list makes the stats next week. Thanks for watching.